Hello, and welcome back to the Point Left podcast with your hosts,
Skyler
and Kaylynne. Oh, we got two hands today.
Can't miss them. All right. This is going to be Skyler's therapy. I didn't realize that until I was writing this one, and then I'm like, why am I tearing up? Several recent anecdotes are kind of sprinkled in here, including a very popular $1 billion movie that is currently making $1 billion, or has made officially $1 billion as of yesterday. And that'll be sprinkled throughout. But before, I want to let's get a little appetizer going. Let's whet our little appetites. So this one, I'm just going to jump to the topic, and then we'll kind of dance around it a little bit, because many smart women have talked about this more poetically than I'm going to, so I'm going to kind of quote them, and then we're going to get into the meat and the potatoes. But this is about girlhood friend groups and the beauty and also trauma that comes with them. And I feel like if you talk to any like woman or girl even, they're going to be like, was there a friend group like that? And everyone no one has a straightforward answer of like, oh my gosh, yeah, my friends. I've always been part of amazing friends the whole time. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like either elementary school, middle school, high school, college, there's always been a group of friends or one friend or just something where you've had a close friendship with another girl or woman that has like rearranged your brain chemistry in completely undoable ways. And so I kind of, before I go into mine, I kind of want to see where you're at. Or your experience too while we're in it. This is womanhood, baby.
Woman to woman. Just like my experience in female friendships in general. I will say I feel like I have been very lucky that there has never really been a time in my... Well, actually, that might kind of be a lie, actually. But I feel like I've been very lucky in that I have had pretty strong, like, friend groups throughout my adolescence and even into now. There's, like, a small bit in college where I just felt like I really wasn't close to anyone. But, like, I had friends. But that, that's a different story. But we were should I get into my anecdote now?
Yeah,
or wait?
do it now.
Okay.
Do it.
So we were kind of talking about this we've just talked about this like many times because Skyler is like, I am waiting to do this episode. Like, I'm going to do the like trauma of girl friendship episodes one of these days. And today is the day. And my traumatic girlhood story is it's weird because I feel very embarrassed to talk about it because it was definitely a situation where I was in the wrong. But then I talked to other girls about it and they're like, oh no, like my friend group did this, or like I was a part of this, or I did this. So my little like girl trauma anecdote is when I was in middle school and high school, I was a part of this friend group and there were 4 of us. And there was one girl who just kind of over the years, this is truly what happened, like now looking back on it from like an adult perspective, is we were just kind of like growing out of each other. And there was this one girl who I think unfortunately, maybe fortunately, I think she found her group after this, but just wasn't growing in the same way or like growing with the same interests that the rest of us kind of had. Like the rest of us were all very like theater kids and like this girl just wasn't, and kind of and yeah, so it was this whole thing. So me and this other girl in the group were kind of talking, we're like, oh my god, she is like so annoying, and we're like, we feel bad because it's just we're like, that's just like her, like she just doesn't know. We were very like Mother Teresa about it. We're like, no, she just doesn't realize that she's being annoying. So what we have to do is tell her that she's being annoying, and she'll fix it and it'll all be better and our friendships will blossom. And but we have to be super like nice about it, and we have to do it in a way where it doesn't feel like we're attacking her. So what we decided to do, and we made this a yearly tradition, which is horrible, but one of my friends I grew up in the Midwest, so during New Year's, it was always very cold and snowy. So every year during New Year's, we would go over to my once friend house, and we would always just, you know, like hang out, have like sparkling grape juice and
get
just,
real
like,
nasty with it.
yeah, just like hang out in her basement. And she had a hot tub, so it was super nice because it's like fucking freezing outside, and then you can just go outside and like chill in the hot tub. That was luxury, and frankly still is. But anyway, so every New Year's we would hang out at this one girl's house, and we would all like get in the hot tub at the end of the night. We're like, happy New Year's, happy New Year's. And of course, with New Year's comes New Year's resolutions. So our super smart and creative and not at all mean way, it was very mean, I don't know why we did this, to tell the one girl that we thought she was annoying and needed to fix her personality, was that we would be in the hot tub, we would go around, and instead of saying our New Year's resolutions, we would tell each other what we thought like each other's New Year's resolution should be. Which is that just like bullying? Yes. But at the time we were like, no, it's fine because we're all doing it. And it was really annoying because I'm still friends with her. I'm actually still friends with 2 out of the 3 people in this group, because unfortunately the girl who just didn't grow with us, she just didn't grow with us, and she found other friends, and I'm very happy for her. She's thriving. But you know, during the time. But anyway, so I'm still friends with 2 of the girls. But one of the girls was just like so nice. Like, she's just one of those girls who is like so pretty, and she was tall and skinny and so nice, so sweet, so talented. Like, literally, we could not think of anything wrong with her. Like, we're like, you have nothing to improve on. Like, I don't know. And
we're really looking.
And I think it was one of those things where I think we literally told her that, like, she wasn't being authentic enough, and that, like, we really think that she could benefit from being a little bit more authentic and a little more...
Because you're like, you're hiding something.
Literally, we're like, there has to be something wrong with you. Like, you can't be this perfect. It's pissing us off. But yeah, that was our like girl trauma, is that literally every single year we're like, okay, what's wrong with everyone? Let's go in a circle and tell each other.
The way
like, how fucked up is that?
The way that our pasts are just so weirdly connected. It's so fucking crazy. We're gonna get into it.
Oh no.
But I had this thought, because I was, you know, like prepping of what this episode was going to be like. And when I think of girlhood, I think of like my own personal, like, you know, inner little girl. And I remember like even you kind of asked this idea months ago of why we as like women are kind of obsessed with making our younger selves proud. Like, why this idea of like protecting, of appeasing this like inner little girl so important to so many people. And then I was reading a couple articles, and this woman, Melissa Febos, wrote this book called Girlhood. And I have to read the whole book, because even like the small snippets, I'm like, am I about to like sob right now? She's like, if women can grow attached to a version of their younger selves as uncommonly pure, creative, and powerful, perhaps it's because such insistence helps us to process the wrongness of what happened next, which would be then growing up.
Wait, sorry, just to interrupt briefly.
What's up?
I literally, like 2 weeks ago, was crying to my therapist about this very thing, because I was just feeling, frankly still am, but we're working through it. It's fine. You know, feeling very like lost in my career. I even told my therapist, I'm like, I feel like it's just like early 20 syndrome. Like, I'm just figuring out who I am. I'm figuring out what I want. I'm figuring out what I want my life to be like. And I was just kind of talking about, and she was like, well, why are you so attached to this, you know, like version of yourself, this like perspective of yourself? And I was like, well, I think it's because I don't want to like let her down. I don't want to like disappoint my younger self. And it was funny because I said her, and my therapist was like, your mom? And I was like, no, me. I was like, we'd have to bring the mommy into it. But I was like, no, me, like my younger self. Like, I feel like if I, you know, give up on this specific career path, or if I choose a lifestyle that isn't aligned with what my younger self envisioned for me, then I am somehow
like betraying
myself. And I'm like, it makes no sense. Logistically, it makes no sense, because I'm like, that's me. That is me currently. She does not exist anymore. But it's weird, because I feel like the way that our minds think about it is like that little girl still exists. Like that little girl is still there in the universe someday. And I think it's so true. It's like you think about all of the hopes and dreams and ambitions that you had when you were a little kid, and how, you know, obviously your priorities change as you get older, but for whatever reason, even if a decision that is best for you presently doesn't align with what your younger self wanted, you feel such guilt. I feel so guilty whenever I feel like I'm making a life choice that doesn't align with like the vision of myself that I had when I was younger.
No, yeah, for sure. I just feel this like protectiveness. And I think, again, like the quote's going to go on of like, you know, the wrongness of what happened next. And that the wrongness would then be of growing up, right? Of being thrust suddenly into like not just the world of adolescence, but of womanhood and all that that comes with and all that that means. The tragedy of like a sudden and necessary personality pivot. And like her impression of femaleness, a tragedy that the flesh remembers, invokes another description of childhood ego death. So in the book The Flamethrowers, a novel by Rachel Kushner, the protagonist tells her lover about a dissociative episode she had as a girl. You become a fixed position, a thing to others and to yourself. There were times, I told him at the age of 5, 6, 7, when it was a shock to me that I was trapped in my own body. Suddenly I would feel locked into an identity, trapped inside myself, as if the container of my person were some kind of terrible mistake. I was living in a nightmare, forced to see from out this limited and unreal me. End quote. So I'm like, oh, I'm buckling up, brother. Though Kushner doesn't explicitly say so, the limited and unreal quality of the narrator's body is a partial function of her girlhood. All identities may amount to prison cells, but the female ones prove particularly narrow. If you're a woman, then the event of becoming a me rather than an I pretends more than melancholy. It unleashes horror. This whole article, I'm like, I'm going to throw up. Crucially, the stress of this moment arises not only from a new awareness of constraint, but what from Elizabeth Bishop in her poem In the Waiting Room framed as the realization that you are one of them. Them is the voiceless, hollow women, the images in magazines. How, I didn't know any I word for it, how unlikely this transformation seemed to be from little girl me to woman me. And then I had an article, the title is The Crisis of American Girlhood. These expressions of inner crisis are just a glint in the startling data reported by federal researchers this week, and this was an article that came out this year. Nearly 1 in 3 high school girls said they had considered suicide, a 60% rise in the past decade. Nearly 15% had been forced to have sex. About 6 in 10 girls were so persistently sad or hopeless that they stopped regular activities. This new report represents nothing short of a crisis in American girlhood. The findings have ramifications for a generation of young women who have endured an extraordinary level of sadness and sexual violence, and present uncharted territory for the health advocates, teachers, counselors, and parents who are trying to help them. The data comes from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention from a nationally representative sample of students in public and private high schools. Quote, America's teen girls are engulfed in a growing wave of sadness, violence, and trauma, the CDC said. The reasons girls are in crisis are likely complex and may vary by race, ethnicity, class, and culture. Harvard psychologist Richard Weisbrod points out that girls are more likely to respond to pain in the world by internalizing conflict and stress and fear, and boys are more likely to translate those feelings into anger and aggression, masking their personal depression. Weisbrod added that girls also are socialized to not be aggressive, and that in a male-dominated culture, girls can be gaslit into thinking there is something wrong with them when problems or conflicts arise. They are prone to blaming themselves, he said. We're raising the best-behaved generation of teenagers on record, said Lisa Demore, a clinical psychologist and author of The Emotional Lives of Teenagers. Quote, they drive with seatbelts, they smoke less, they have less sex, they wear helmets, they do all of these things that we did not do, and yet they are in a crisis. So... Downer episode, everyone. So obviously this world of like not just girlhood, but teen girlhood is like a battlefield of which like I am not, gonna shatter minds by saying that like turning into a teen girl is probably one of the most ruthless experiences that you can probably go through, because like you're just suddenly thrust with like, half truths about what being a teenager means, what being a woman means, what it means to be you. And then another article is called the Poem of the Brokenness of Girlhood. And so they were describing how it felt to be like, that boundless, happy little kid. And it said, quote, then suddenly my happiness was gone. I did not want to wear pretty dresses anymore because compared to the other girls I knew, my clothes were not pretty anymore. I didn't want to make new friends because people were not nice anymore. I began to feel uneasy in the presence of adults, especially men, because a man abused my trust and I did not feel safe anymore. In a moment at the tender age of 11, my girlhood was over. No, taken. I was lost and confused. Like I'm no longer a girl, but not yet a woman. I began to stumble through this new hood, grasping for something to hold on to. I just wanted something to define the season I was in, but the only thing I found was brokenness.
Ouch.
How are we feeling, ladies?
I think it's really interesting because I feel like this is an experience that a lot of teen girls have, but I just remember being so hyper aware of the fact that men and boys would and could and would sexualize me. And I think it was really interesting because especially the time that we were teenagers, it was very much at the height of like, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I wish I would have maybe handled differently. But it was at the height where people were kind of like, oh, you know, it's fine if you have cleavage. It's fine if like your butt is hanging out because if they're looking, it's their problem. Like they shouldn't be so sick in the head to sexualize a teenager who's just wearing, you know, like a tank top or whatever, which definitely has truth to it, you know, obviously. But I think there were definitely moments where
you were encouraged. Like if you didn't dress sexy, you weren't liberated enough.
Yes, exactly. This like idea of sexual liberation was I think put on us from such a young age that I think would have been way more appropriate for myself in my 20s or in my, you know, even in college or whatever, than it was when I was like 13 years old. Like when I was 12 and 13 years old, I did not need to be thinking about like my sexual liberation. And I don't know. I just remember that really like taking a toll on me. And it's really interesting because I now think I don't dress like overtly modestly, but I'm not comfortable. Like even right now I'm wearing a dress that like for me is very, very short and I'm not super comfortable in it. I'm very aware of like the movement of my body within it. And not that I have a problem with it on other people at all. Like I literally could not give a shit. But I think it's interesting to like see myself now and kind of think about what I wear now versus like what I was wearing or like what I thought I would be wearing now when I was 12, 13, 14. You know, like oh God, it's so weird. And even when you said 11, I was like, yeah, that's the age. That's the age when your girlhood is like ripped from you. It's just so, it just makes me so fucking mad because it's like you think of an 11-year-old boy and obviously I don't know what it feels like to be an 11-year-old boy. So I don't know, maybe they do have like this horrible experience being teen boys or whatever, but it just does not feel like it could possibly compare to the fact that like we have to grow up so quickly. And even personally, like I was put in a situation where I had to grow up very quickly for like family reasons, but I think any average teen girl feels that same amount of pressure to grow up very quickly. And I even remember literally being like, I wanted to be in my 20s my entire childhood because that idea of like a beautiful, sexy, charismatic woman was like all that mattered to me. And I'm just like, damn, like I wish I could go back and just like be a girl.
And speaking of, I'm gonna read you, it's kind of an article, but literally I read this and I had to like stare at the ceiling for 2 minutes straight. It's called The Wildness of Girlhood by Bonnie Mary Liston. Emily Bronte wrote in Wuthering Heights in 1847, quote, "I wish I were a girl again, half savage and hardy and free." Catherine Valiente wrote in Deathless 2011, quote, "She knew herself, how she had slowly over years become a cat, a wolf, a snake, anything but a girl. How she had wrung out her girlhood like death. There is a period in many little girls' lives around the age of 10 where they go completely wild, not in the sense of Girls Gone Wild, which depressingly clogs up the search results, but in the most natural sense of the word, feral and free. Not every little girl experiences this at the same time. Not every little girl experiences this at all, and some little girls don't get to be girls when they are little. Womankind is not a monolith. But enough, I think, would recognize this phenomenon. I'm talking about the girls who would become obsessed with horses, or wolves, or witches, and who knew themselves to be wild creatures like those. They vanish outdoors, hiding in trees, sticking their hands in the dirt, making potions from mud and sticks. They escape into complex worlds of their own imagining, shared between other little girls or solitary kingdoms. I was one such little girl. I stopped brushing my hair, and my long braid became tangled and matted and filled with sticks, which pleased me. My mother said I'd have to cut it off, which pleased me even more. I was made of scraped knees and bare feet that were steady over sharp rocks, and my heart was a bird, and for a brief moment, very little scared me. There's a bit of anger involved, a strange mix of anger and joy. It's at this point, perhaps, that girls become aware of how little patience the world has for the unremittingly scrappy. But we are beyond the world, untouchable, unconquerable, and unafraid. Of course it passes. We age out of wildness and straight into puberty, where our anger is on ourselves and our bodies and our mothers and I don't know what else. We're part of the world again, and sometimes we forget being wild altogether, and sometimes we remember it fondly, like Kathy in Wuthering Heights, as something we cannot recapture, an innocence killed by the stressful minutiae of adulthood. I didn't stay wild. I grew my hair out, started wearing shoes almost every day, and went to university, where I accidentally majored in classics after taking one really, really good class about myth, magic, and religion in the ancient world. It's where I learned about the festival of Arcadia. I think that's
Arctia? Or Arctia?
Arctia? At Baron. Whatever. I'm going to say Arctia. Dedicated to the goddess Artemis. Bringing it back to Greek mythology, baby. Artemis is fairly well known as one of the top-tier Greek gods, the twin sister of Apollo. She is moon to his sun, big on arrows, not big on men, goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, and all wild things. Less well known is another one of Artemis's domains, childbirth, children, and young unmarried women. It is this aspect that characterizes the Arctia. Every 4 years or so, the young girls of Athens between ages of 5 and 10 would go into the woods to make sacrifices to Artemis, run races, dance, and live like bears. Literally, they were called oktoi, which means little bears. And they were supposed to run around pretending to be bears, wearing special bear skins, or following one of the periodic Athenian budget cuts, saffron-colored robes. And at the end of the festival, they would remove the robes and return to the city where, as women, they would look forward to not being able to vote, not owning property, but rather being property of their fathers, future husbands, or other male relatives. But before that, for a moment, they got to use their legs to run fast and their voices to growl, while their bodies danced and leapt, and they were bare to the sky, belonging to no man. One of the delights of studying history is that, in spite of the fact that the past is a foreign country, wildly alien to our modern perspectives in so many ways, there are always moments where you can spot humans being humans, even 4,000 years ago. Reading about the oktoi, I felt a kinship with those long-ago girls, hardly articulated. Just a pulse of recognition. A big mood, if you will. No one knows the exact purpose behind this festival, so in a very real way, nothing I say can be wrong. Some historians have hypothesized that the Arctia symbolized leaving behind childhood to enter womanhood and marriage, which doesn't hold a lot of water. The ceremony was very specifically for girls between 5 and 10, and Athenian girls usually didn't marry before at least the age 15. This theory seems to me to be born from male historians struggling to conceive of something that women would do that wasn't somehow about men. Others suggest that the ceremony could have functioned as a pressure gauge to let out the tensions that form in a fundamentally unequal and unfair society, like the traditions of masters and servants switching ranks for a day. Be that as it may, why did the Greek girls need to run so badly it was codified into their society? Why do girls run wild today? Is it catharsis in the face of a world that will try to mold them in 1,000 different ways? Is it a transformational stage, a cocoon, and the invisible tremors of a puberty already begun? Or is it a gift, a moment of divine wisdom where little girls are seeing the world and themselves in a more beautiful light? Another important question. What is wildness in the context of human civilization? The world and its synonyms have an ugly history of being used against people of color to degrade their standing as human beings and justify the cruelties and oppression of white invading forces. This too goes all the way back to ancient Greece and beyond. The literal translation of barbarian is someone who doesn't speak Greek. If wildness is a behavior outside of societal norms, it pays to remember that society is a human invention. And while we keep working on it, adding and removing elements like the world's largest and most volatile game of Jenga, the building blocks of our society remain fundamentally racist, sexist, and unfair to most. Savage behaviors exhibited by the indigenous peoples living in places that other people wanted to occupy could include such terrors as having a relationship with natures that were enriching instead of destructive, not living up to Western beauty standards and their puritanical shame and disgust for the human body, not participating in such occupations of civilized people as advanced weapons manufacture, capitalism, or invading and colonizing. Things that seem normal in Western society, like working too many hours a week in a gray box where you can't see the sun to pay off your debts, are not natural behaviors for humans, whereas things that feel very natural, like the desire to jump into large bodies of water or being passionately in love with the moon, do not always seem normal. And then what is wildness then? A return to nature, listening to our bodies, letting our bodies be the animal that moves us instead of a semiotic representation of all that we are to the world. It's hard to be a little girl. Sometimes it's easier to be a bear instead. I don't know. I don't have an answer for the wildness of girlhood. I miss the bravery of the feral child I once was. I have to pay rent now and worry about career goals and spiritual fulfillment and the environment and politics. And to be honest, horses no longer hold the strange fascination to me as they once did. Still, when I see children today running wild, being unapologetically weird and strange and hardy and free, my heart grows 3 sizes larger and quite luminescent with joy. This one's for the little girls. And one more quote from Mary Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? To end that with, oddly enough, a quote from Taylor Swift in one of her favorite songs. Please picture me in the weeds. Before I learned civility, I used to scream ferociously anytime I wanted. This has been your slam poetry reading for the day.
Snaps.
How are we feeling so far?
No, that actually really reminded me, especially when you started talking of horses. I haven't mentioned them in a while, but Bingetopia did a episode on horse girls that is really, really fascinating, and I encourage everyone to listen to it because it's just so interesting. I guess an analysis of the reason why young girls are often fascinated with horses, and like of this very common, like elementary and middle school trope of girls is like, everyone had a friend, or maybe you were like the horse girl. I definitely had a horse girl friend, like when I was in like 3rd grade. But it's really interesting. A lot of what they say is that a big reason why they think so many girls are fascinated with horses is because they're wild and free and strong, and they are incredibly strong, and yet they are feminine, which is very interesting because historically they haven't been, like cowboys and shit. Like they were obsessed with horses, but now when you think of horses, like I think it's you're much more inclined to think of the feminine. And yeah, it was just really interesting, but that really speaks to me because part of the reason why I've really been, I think, struggling with just like who I am and what I want is,
it's gonna be therapy for both of us. Yeah, we might both cry.
Well, it's just like realizing, I think, like how glorious the earth is and how wonderful human connection is, and how like basically realizing that like everything is so wonderful, and somehow we chose capitalism and that's how we have to spend the majority of our lives is working. And like I don't know, I feel whenever I say shit like this, like everyone's like, oh my god, you're so Gen Z, like no one wants to work these days, blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, why the fuck would I?
You're right, Kim K.
Like literally, why would I? And it's like every other day I debate between whether I want to be like a cool city girl and like walk to the local coffee shop and like have conversations with people in grocery stores, or if I want to just like move off the grid and like basically live in a commune and have all of my food and fabrics and everything I need like from the earth. And I don't know, it's just, I think it's very frustrating because when you are a girl and you're just like playing in the mud, or you're, playing with your friends, or you're pretending to be a cat. Every single girl I know has pretended to be a cat in their life. Like it is a principle. Just that sentence, of girlhood.
Like, it's hard to be a little girl. Sometimes it's easier to be a bear.
Yeah. Like, damn. Like, that is just so like, yeah, it just makes me yearn for
the children yearn for the minds.
Yeah, yearn for but it makes me yearn for a simpler life in many ways, and how I think a lot of times when we reflect on girlhood, it's often just a reflection of, I think, enjoyment of life and like enjoyment of the simple things and like the creativity that you can have when I think a lot of times people think of like the summertime when you have 3 months out of the year where literally nothing to do, and you spend it making art, hanging out with your friends, making Play-Doh, making fucking slime, you know,
Yeah.
like, and it just sounds so fun and refreshing, and it really does make me yearn to like live childhood over again, but it's like I want to do it with like my brain now,
Yeah.
you know.
So, you know, I'm throwing a lot of articles at you, a lot of scholarly ones. No more. No mas. Now it's getting into the personal tea shit. So you have this, like, this magic of girlhood, right? Where you're wild, you're free. And girlhood friendships, and like, in that way are so important because you feel like the sisterhood, it's like communicative and it's communal, and you just feel seen and heard and whatever. And then there's this transitional period where a lot of times it's like, it's brutal and it's like a, you know, graphic transitional period. And then suddenly your friends become like your enemies, and you have all these teenage girls that are miserable and unhappy. So like, what happens there? What turns, like, you know, girl friendships into like the thing that, you know, connects you and the thing that makes you happy to the thing that could actively like drag you down? You're gonna think this is a weird pivot, but I've recently watched the Barbie movie for the 3rd time. And each time I wanted to see if I could see, you know, like another reading into it, because otherwise I think I'd go insane. Like the first time I watched it, I just like watched it to enjoy it. And the second time I watched it, I took like a religious reading to it, which was really fun. And then like this final time, I took it the way that Greta Gerwig, the director, has said in interviews that she pitched it as, which is like a journey into womanhood. And based on everything I've said so far about all these articles, all these little vignettes, let me know if this sounds familiar. So you start off in a world of your own design. Maybe you're a little cruel, but you haven't learned empathy yet. Just connection, like nearly baseless friendship. Like you become friends with girls based on almost nothing, but there's a connection there, so you're friends. But then you notice that something is wrong with you, something that your friends can't relate to. You're that weird, like, the only person that can relate to you is this weird girl that you don't really want to end up like. And then suddenly you're aware of your own body. Many women claim their first realization of womanhood was being catcalled, ogled, and this first happened to me when I was like 10 or 11. You are suddenly self-conscious. You're not taken seriously. You feel out of place. Teenagers bully you. Quote from the movie, like, look at yourself. You're now aware of how ridiculous you look, how ridiculous you act. You look around yourself and you see your friends, your capable, smart, beautiful friends acting dumb around boys, acting like brainwashed. You don't recognize them. And suddenly you don't recognize your guy friends either. Last you checked, they were sweet, they were kind, they played games with you, and now they're acting like men. They're loud, they're obnoxious, they're abrasive, and nobody really knows this game that they're all trying to play. And like, yeah, eventually everything evens out and your friends, like your childhood teenage friends, gain some form of identity, but it isn't the same, and you can't go back to the place that you were at before you've grown up. All of this to say, that I think girlhood friend groups are important and beautiful, and that they're also the cruelest experiences that you can have, because girlhood friend groups are the first place that you take out these new feelings on, the first place where you can practice misogyny, you can practice power structures. Like, your friends are often your first bully and your first bullied. It's like a way to practice like self-regulating all these rules that society has suddenly placed on you, and taking out your anger about this, about, you know, keeping you and yours in line. Girls are like drowning when they become teenagers, and they start to self-cannibalize to try to stay afloat. Little girls, like tweens, they can be the most cruel people because they have this like anger to get out, and they know you deeper than like some people in your life may know you. And I think back like personally to what shaped me the most growing up, and I'm sure my family had a part in the stuff I watched, the books I read, school, but like, who made me self-conscious first? Who saw me at like my most unlikable? And like, I couldn't confide in my parents or my sister the same way, so my friends saw me at like my most unlikable, my worst, my like secrets. They knew it. My mom didn't fucking know them. She didn't know who my crushes were, who my secret, you know, like thoughts about the universe was. That was sleepover talk. That was my friends' fodder that they could then use against me if they wanted to. Who made me realize first that maybe liking girls was weird? Like, who made me understand that my clothes weren't right, that my hair was wrong, that I was doing things wrong, and like that I was unpopular, and who encouraged me to try to like fit in that way. And that was like my first introduction to like my cannibalistic friend group that I think kind of molded my brain chemistry more than I kind of gave it credit for. So I know you said that you had like a friend group in high school, but did you have like elementary school, middle school friend group like this? Were you in like a trio, a duo, like a squad? Like, what was your atmosphere going into that like teenager?
I was actually going to say it's really interesting. I think one of the most pivotal moments in my childhood and possibly even like, well, maybe not. Well, actually, no, I would say most traumatic, like at that point in my life, was when I was 9 years old. I was turning 10 and I was going into 5th grade, and my family moved. And we moved, it was only like an hour and a half away from, you know, where I had grown up previously. But that literally felt like the universe, because I was moving to a completely new town. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends. I was moving to a new home where my room was different. Like everything was so unfamiliar. And I truly think that was the first time that I felt self-conscious, and I felt it so deeply because it felt like I had so much to be self-conscious of, because I had never had to really make friends before. Like I went to elementary school with like a lot of the same people I went to preschool with. Like they were my neighbors. Like we had just grown up together. It makes me want to cry.
We're both gonna cry on camera, by the way.
But it just like, that was so...
I did the same thing, girl. You fucking serious?
I know.
I didn't move states, but I had to move.
Yeah.
I had to start over in 4th grade.
It was so pivotal for me, because I literally remember like moving to that school and I felt so fucking lost, because I was like looking around and like obviously everything was new and everything was different, and I was trying to figure out like who I wanted to align myself with. And I feel like it was the first moment where like I didn't really view friendship as like this pure enjoyable thing, and I viewed it more as like a social transaction. And I remember all of the cool kids were wearing Hollister, and I remember I'm like, what the fuck? Like, was my old school just like not up to par?
Yeah,
or
right?
did I just not fucking notice because I was so secure?
I didn't need to notice.
Yeah, because I was secure in my friendships, and I was like in a place where I was comfortable. I remember moving and like immediately begging my mom to like take me to Hollister or take me to Abercrombie so that I could get the graphic V-neck that would surely make me popular. And it like, I had never felt more insecure. I never realized I was an introvert until I moved, because I was just like so quiet. I was so afraid to speak. I just did not know how to make friends. And I think that moment like really, really, it's like, I don't know if it changed me or if it just brought out aspects of my personality that like I hadn't realized were there, because I never like needed to. And like obviously it all worked out. Like I'm very thankful, but I had a really, really good like friend group when I was in elementary school. I lived in a neighborhood where there were like a ton of other kids my age, so I was friends with a bunch of my neighbors. And I had a bunch of like, I just had like such an amazing friend group. And I even remember being in like middle school and even sometimes in high school and just like wondering how different my life would have been had I not moved. Like, would I have been more popular? Would I have like been perceived differently? Would I have gotten into different colleges? Would I have gotten different grades? Like, I felt like all of these things were kind of dependent on the school I was at and like the friends that I had. And I feel like I was very lucky in high school, especially, that I kind of ended up being friends with like, not the nerds, but ended up being friends with like the ambitious theater kids. So they were all like in AP classes and honors classes. And it made me want to be in AP and honors classes, because I'm like, those are where all my friends are. So it made me really, really like try harder in school. And when I was hanging out with my friends, they're like, oh, do you want to go like study at Starbucks? Like we weren't just like fucking around, like we were like studying and like actually doing things. And so I feel very, very thankful for that, because frankly, had I been in a different friend group, I don't know if I would have gotten the grades I got. No, but especially being in elementary school. Yeah, I remember my first, because my birthday is in September, so it's like a month after school starts. So when I turned 10, I really did not have any friends, and like I had a couple people, but I actually invited a bunch of my friends from my old elementary school. I actually remember, I'm very thankful now that I think about it. I'm like, an hour and a half literally is not even that far, but I couldn't,
for little kids. Yes.
Yeah, I'm like,
because you can't drive.
Yeah, I'm like, I couldn't drive. I had no idea. But I'm very, very thankful for this. I like invited all of my friends from my old elementary school, And my mom let me get out of school early that Friday. And then we went to the school and we like picked up all my friends at the elementary school. And it was so fun because I got to like see all the other people who like, you know, I was acquaintances with, and everyone was like, oh my God, Kaylynne, like, hi. And I felt like I was like, I feel so seen. And they all hopped in, you know, the back of our car.
The paddy wagon.
Yeah, and we went back home, and then we had like a little sleepover moment, and then their parents came and picked them up from our house. And it was it was just like, I remember that being like one of my favorite birthdays, except there was this one girl who she was my neighbor, so like it was one of those things where they're like, oh my God, like you're in the same grade, you're gonna be such good friends. And
then you weren't.
She was just mean. She was like she was literally mean. Okay, sorry, now I'm just going on a tangent. But this was in middle school where like our parents were like, oh my God, you guys have to be friends because you're both girls, you're both in the same grade. We had wildly different interests. Like we literally had basically nothing in common.
Yeah, I had a couple of those.
She was so fucking mean to me. She would literally do things to me or say things to me. And then when I would be like, hey, that's not okay, like what the heck? She would run to her mom before I could and tell her mom all of the things that she did to me. She would say I did to her.
Girl.
So she knew what she was doing was like fucked up and mean, because she was literally telling her mom like, oh my God, Kaylynne's so mean to me. Like she did this, she did this, she did this. I remember one time I was so fed up with her. I think I was literally like 11.
You want to pull a Kevin McAllister and film her?
No, I was so fed up with her where we were like, we had this little creek in our backyard, and
I drowned her.
No, but it would freeze over during the winter, and we would like go on with our sneakers or whatever and just like slide around. I don't even remember what happened, but I got so angry with her that I pushed her.
Oh.
And I pushed her into the snow, and then I like ran crying, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Yeah, but it was, I don't have really like specific examples, but that was, I think I had a really good like starter friend group when I was in elementary school. Like we had a real solid group.
This is when Skyler will hijack the podcast and turn it into a therapy session. Everyone gather your boots. So mine, the most like influential one for me, this friend group lasted like 3 years, which like all of middle school, which is a feat. Middle schoolers don't stick together. By the time it reached high school, it had reached its end. And names have been changed. I'm not here to like, you know, do a full like smear campaign against these people. So if you hear a name, that's not their real name. And I'm going to try really hard to adhere to their fake names. Watch me like blow it as I'm like going on a rampage. So I was in a friend group of 3, and the dynamic was interesting. So you got Danielle, was like this effortlessly popular one, the cool one, the trendy one. Then there was Allie, and Allie was popular too, but like in a different way. She was like the girl next door, like that quirky, clumsy one who was like a little bit more boy focused, but she wasn't like boy obsessed or anything. And then there was me, and I lived far away, and like my jokes never quite landed. I never quite got the hang of like what I was supposed to do, but I always felt like the two of them were like doing me a favor. Like they were both daring to hang out with someone who like wasn't as popular as them, who didn't have that many friends, who like was a weirdo, who was like too loud and too much, and like fiercely protective over what I did have. And I always felt like left out of everything, like, which would make me have this enormous chip on my shoulder, but it would also make me like afraid to tell them how I really felt, because then they would realize like what a huge mistake they were making by being my friend and then leave me alone. So I was like a yes man, and then I would say some sarcastic thing, which I thought was going to be funny if this was like a TV show or a movie, but it's not a TV show or a movie because this is real life. And so I was just like, I was a yes man, and then occasionally I'd say something that was like, oh man, that would be like such a good one-liner if I was like a cartoon character, but you're not, Skyler. You're a teen girl. And we were classified as a trio for all of middle school. Like, if it was just me somewhere, people would ask me where the other two were, and vice versa. And it was through them that anyone kind of knew who I was. And I felt so honored to, like, be a part of something. And I felt like through association with them, I stopped being completely invisible. Like, how weird and off-putting could I be if 2 of the most popular girls were best friends with me? Like, I'd at least be a literal tolerable, right? I mean, statistically. I was never invited to any parties or anything, but, like, people knew who I was, and I was seen enough. And I would always have this, like, lingering fear that they would, like, they felt dragged down by me, that they felt obligated to hang out with me because, like, they felt bad or something, and that they were secretly laughing at me, like, behind my back, and that I was secretly, like, the butt of the joke with them.
Sorry, just to clarify real quick.
Yeah.
So you say that like you were never invited to parties and stuff, but were they?
Yes. Well, you can't. If someone wasn't invited, Skylar, we couldn't invite you because they didn't invite you, and it'd be really rude to bring a +1 if they didn't say that it was okay for you to come.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah, right? I had words.
Like, we've been there. I'm having flashbacks.
And there was a fight in the 7th grade over a boy, because of fucking course it was. So for my entire, like, middle school love life, this is how it went. Well, I guess for 2 years. 8th grade is when shit hit the fan. But, like, this is how it went. So boys would ask out Danielle first because she was the coolest one who got along with guys the best, and like no middle school boy knows how to have a platonic friendship with a pretty girl. Like they just don't know it's an option. They at least want to try, right? Dating, just to, because they're told that's what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And she would turn them down every time because she was only ever interested in being friends. She was kind of like a baddie that way. And then they would go down the pipeline and ask out Allie next. And in my middle school head, I was convinced that if Allie said no, then they would go down the pipeline further and ask me out next. This was delusional on my part. I realize that now. Like, Allie and Danielle were often in the same circles. And I doubt that middle school boys were, like, so devoted to the friendship rules and, like, the high school food chain that they would feel obligated to ask me out next. In all likelihood, they wouldn't have. But I guess we'll never know because Allie never said no to anyone who asked her out, which is itself something that Allie now looks back on poorly. And I've talked about this with her. We kind of reconnect a little bit more in high school and afterwards, that she felt like, you know, she was a victim of sexualizing herself for like male attention, male validation. So this isn't like a, you know, my friends were mean to me and fuck that. Like they were, but I definitely, like, they weren't evil. And like girlhood makes a victim of us all.
Yeah. Everyone's going through shit.
But I got so bitter about this because like, I would get my little crushes, and then I got to go through that classic situation of, like, having my best friend date that person instead. And then when they broke up, that person was off limits forever, lest I break, like, girl code. Or if I had a crush on, like, a boy, and then Allie had a crush on that same boy, I was kind of expected to, like, shut up about that boy from then on because that was Allie's crush, and then that means that she had dibs on him, and then I was breaking girl code by liking him too. Almost like my crushes were like a fantasy. They're like, okay, let's be serious now. Like if Allie has a crush on a boy, it has more validity because it might actually happen. Like you can have your crushes, but like let's be a little realistic here. Have you ever actually talked to someone? So my pool of people I was allowed to have a crush on kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and I kept getting like fiercely protective over the people that were considered like mine to have. Mm-hmm. And one of these, like one boy was Jacob, which was Danielle's oldest friend, so he was invited to all of our stuff a lot, and I had a huge crush on him. I've actually reconnected with Jacob after the fact, because Jacob is now very proudly gay and engaged to a man, so good job, Jacob. But at the time, Jacob was like, I needed a beard. My friends were really starting to like come at me for not having a girlfriend at this point, and I was panicking. And I looked around all the girls that I knew, and I picked you because I knew that you wouldn't want anything from me. I knew that your standards were so, I've definitely talked about this on the podcast before, but like your standards for like I would have to like say hi and that you looked pretty, and that was all I needed to do. Or if I held your hand, you would get too flustered and run away. You didn't make me have to kiss you or do anything else that I wasn't comfortable with. You were the perfect beard, and I'm like, well, thank you, Jacob. Oh my god. But because of that, like again, I lived far away, so like you know the three of them would hang out without me, and I would just get so fiercely jealous because like those are the crumbs that I'm allowed to have. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he did break up with me, I guess, because his friends were like, so you and your girlfriend haven't, like, you know, done second base. Middle school boys don't know anything. But they're like, couldn't help but notice that, like, you picked a loser girl to be your girlfriend. And so imagine this. This is literally, like, even, like, reminiscing about this. Dude, my vengeance could have burnt down cities. I was out with my family. I don't realize why, but my phone started blowing up, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was wrong. And then I get like a million texts from Allie. She's like, I'm sorry. Like, and then I get one text from Jacob, like, me and Allie are going out.
What?
Allie dated Jacob after we had broken up. And I'm like, that was my one thing.
You're like, so I abided by girl code literally for what? Literally for what? Do you know what's so funny? When I was in like middle school and high school, I would strategically pick the boys that I had crushes on specifically because, you know, you all talk about like who your type is and like the type of, you know, guys that you're interested in. I would specifically pick boys that I knew none of my friends would ever like in a million years. So that way, like, they not only were they off limits because I had a crush on them, but I would never have to deal with the fact that like they would have a crush on him at the same time or whatever. And I'm like, I didn't even like half these boys. I was just like, you.
Yep. So this led to like the first big rift because then I was fucking furious. Yeah. I was fuming. I had righteous fury. And of course they didn't last too long either because then Allie was like, all right, so let's do girlfriend boyfriend stuff. And Jacob was like, I've made a mistake. I've made such a big mistake. Oh no. And then, you know, eventually we kind of patched things up, but that definitely, that led to a rift in the 3-person friend group. So leading into, I guess, like the second semester of 7th grade.
Oh my God, sorry. This is all in 7th grade.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Is that Allie and Danielle had classes together. And this was the first year that like they had a class that we like, for some reason we all just like lucked out in having classes together, that I at least had a class with one of them. Mm-hmm. But this was one of the first times that they had like 2 classes that I wasn't in at all. And in those classes, I like didn't talk to anybody because I wasn't used to making friends. And they were like, have you noticed recently that Skyler is acting different than she used to? And I'm like, and apparently, yes. And they were just like, do you think maybe it's because of us? Do you think maybe it's our influence that's causing her to act this unlikable, this... I told you the situations would be so similar. Is it through us that she's becoming annoying and we don't want to hang out with her anymore? Maybe it is. Maybe it's our fault. So we're going to they kept calling it an experiment because this is a scientific endeavor. This isn't bullying. This is self-help. Is that they're like, maybe because of our influence is why, you know, she's acting the way that she's acting. So as an experiment, we just will stop talking to her in all capacities, and then maybe she'll revert back to normal. They told me, if they ambushed me of this plan, I had no idea what, and then they just walked away. And I went, hello? Hell the fuck oh. So for like 2 weeks, I didn't talk to anybody.
Wait, so they told you what was happening?
Yes.
Beforehand? Okay.
They were like, we're going to ignore you, by the way. It's, don't mess with the experiment. And so then I would like tap them on the shoulder and literally tap them in lunch, and they would be like, do you guys hear something?
No.
They would do that.
No.
They would hit me with that. I would sit alone. It would be in class. I suddenly had they wouldn't sit next to me. I would like literally like, you know, I would like, you know, annoy them, and they would just be like, you are messing up with the experiment. Like, you are ruining everything. And then eventually I sat Allie down and I'm like, I don't even know what I am supposed, like, first of all, how will you know I'm changing if you don't talk to me? Second of all, I don't even know what issues you're talking about. And they're like, well, you have a lot. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to be fixing if you don't tell me? So then the next day, I opened my locker. And in the locker, I didn't realize I still had this.
No.
Is this used to be a multi-page note.
Pulling out a notebook paper.
At the top of this, I don't know if you say, it says Skyler's issues on it.
Oh, she had popular girl handwriting.
You'll see, this is the first page, and then this is the second page. You see how the handwriting is different? They took turns. Over one class, they were just like, let's come up with things that Skyler has issues with, and then we'll give them to her, and that way you'll know. So there's 40 here. There was one more page. I think that page must be lost to the active time. And I'm
sorry, there were 3 pages of like, is this... Okay, I think this is like wide rule notebook paper, but like that's a lot. Okay.
Are you ready? This is gonna be a dramatic live reading.
Oh my god, I'm so scared.
And the reason, before we even begin, like I'm not doing this to like, you know, victimize myself forever, because I think reading this, first of all, it just seems like a time capsule of like middle school problems. Because you'll notice a lot of Allie's issues with me is things that I did that I didn't apologize for. But a lot of Danielle's issues were issues just with me. And I think it's both important to realize, like, I recognize so much of myself now based on the patterns that I learned then. Like, that my tendencies to be a yes man, to fear rejection, like, unfortunately, even though I feel like I have grown so much, obviously since I was 10 or 11, 13 years old, my personality isn't that different. And I feel like a lot of these, it's both like, oh, I've come so far, and also like, shit. It's always nice to kind of like get humbled a little bit and just be like, some things never really change. And also I just feel like it's good to know your own lore, because then I feel like if you know your own, because you forget these things.
Yeah.
You forget that so many of these things happen to you, because why should you remember like what your middle school friends said about you? And I didn't realize I had kept this until I was going through like, you know, my stuff. Going through like, you know, my stuff I wanted to keep to take to college. I forgot that I had kept this, and I'm like, oh my God, is this my issues list? And I just feel like the more you remember about your own background, the more like your own choices that you make now make more sense.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say too, I feel like, especially when you're in middle school, like, you obviously are not like a fully formed human. Like,
who was learned empathy yet.
Yeah, so it's like we all had fucking like behavioral issues at that point that hopefully now we have since like worked on and fixed and like reflected on. But sometimes there are just personality differences as well, where it's like, okay, that's not really changing. That's just something that like maybe doesn't vibe with you.
Yeah, a lot of this, like, a trigger warning, this takes you back to like a very bullying a place of bullying. Because some of these do go brutal. And it should be said too that like I hold no ill will to either of these women now. Like, obviously, like, I should not be held accountable, but I know I was fucking annoying. I was like the annoying theater, like so many of the issues that they put in here. Like, I recognize that I probably wasn't the easiest. I think I've made that clear, you know, in the preface for this, that like I'm aware that I was super annoying, you know, girl who didn't pick up on social cues, who, you know, I was probably hard to be friends with. And, you know, I think, you know, all those articles about how hard it is to be a teenage girl, like, I hope I see this less as like a takedown and more like everyone's a victim in this situation. But also, like, this is such good gossip that I feel like this is what podcasts are for.
It's kind of hilarious.
All right, number 1. You try too hard to act popular.
Oh.
You try to say stuff like popular people. You don't know when to stop. You are mean to me, Danielle, and Jacob. You make fun of Jacob, which is true. I didn't know how to have feelings.
Yeah.
You try to get attention. Example, what am I sitting on? Which is, yeah, I would scream in class, and then everyone would look at me, and I'd be like, I sat on something. I don't remember this. You steal people's money. Paid food and don't pay them back. I was a little bit of a mooch, I'll be honest. I'm like, can you pay for me? I was like, because I didn't have any money. This is the funniest one. I'm not going to change his name because it doesn't fucking matter. But Allie's like most long-term boyfriend had long hair, and I called her a lesbian. Things are funny now in hindsight. Weren't we all just going through some stuff? I laughed at Isaiah, pointed at Isaiah when he's crying. That one was fair. I didn't like Isaiah. That shouldn't be my fault. You get mad for no reason.
Oh my God, I love... Wait, can I see this?
Yes.
Oh, she does A's like that. I thought mad was spelled like MED. There, instead of like FOR for 4, it's the number 4.
Also, I love the you get mad for no reason. Skylar's issues. It's like, I don't know. You get mad when me and Danielle try helping your issues. You tell me to get away from you because I'm keeping secrets, and you hug me, not saying a simple sorry or asking if you can have a hug. You grab people's personal property and either break it on accident, that's fair, or don't give it back. That's not true. You pop people's knuckles when they don't want it. That's fair. I did. You're learning so much about like little me too. You can't keep a secret. Damn. You expect me and Danielle to make you popular. We can't do that. Only you, and these issues are part of the reason you aren't.
Oh,
you can be
God.
Really annoying sometimes. You butt into people's conversations. When we try to help you, you try to talk to us and diss the experiment. This is the most middle school thing ever. You know how, like, you want to be Jacob something. Like, we're his daughters, I'm his dog. Like, if he wants to be something, he'll tell you.
Uh-huh.
I just like an inside joke that I was feeling left out of. You're at a 9-year-old issue management. I know a 9-year-old who acts exactly like you. You make up stuff that isn't true and then change your mind. We're switching over to Danielle's POV now. And like all of those ones, it's like, this instance you did this, and this time you did this, and this time you did this. And Danielle was like, bitch. You make a big deal out of nothing. You always make a sad face. I'm hated face every time I tell you about stuff that me and Jacob have done when we hang out. Well, actually anything about Jacob. You try to sound popular by saying stuff. I know Allie said this, but you don't know when to stop. You exaggerate a lot, so I don't know who to believe. You invite yourself over. You're too skeptical. You don't let go of things, I say, reading aloud my
From 7th grade. Oh my
You
God.
bring things up when they aren't supposed to be brought up. You hardly ever ask teachers questions, which, you're not my tutor.
Oh my God.
You take stuff without asking. You hurt people when they do stuff you like or don't like. That's just me smacking. Like, when I was laughing, I would smack them. They'd be like, ow! And I'd be like, I was stimming. You try to say things that might make you sound cool.
Why is that on there like 4 times?
You are not popular! Boom! Boom! Attention, which you want. You say things like, please don't pick me around the teachers just so she'll pick you. Oh, and this one is the killer one. You want to read that one out loud for me? Number 39?
No, okay. Sorry, I just gasped reading this in my head. You think you have way more friends than you really do. Damn. It is funny because so many... Okay.
A couple things.
Not me defending myself. But the attention thing is like... Haven't we all? I
was a middle school theater kid.
Literally, that is every... Yeah, maybe it's just because I'm a theater kid, but I remember that was one of the things when we were bringing it back to the beginning, when we were in the hot tub and we were telling each other our New Year's resolutions. I think that was one of the things for one of my friends. We were like, you are just like an attention whore. Like, you will just do anything and everything for attention. And it's so obvious. And it's like... Yeah, because you're in middle school and you want people to like you and pay attention to you. So sometimes you do obnoxious things because you don't have like the social awareness yet to understand that like maybe that's a bit obnoxious, you know? And so, yeah, it's just like, again, I think most of those things are just behavioral like things that you've grown out of, you know. It's fine,
but like it's incredible because like some of those things I was like, fuck, like I'm wondering, like, you know, I'm talking, you know, I haven't talked to my therapist in like a year and a half. I probably should stir that up again, but like one of the things is my therapist would be like, you know, you have all these thoughts, but like where'd those even come from? I doubt anyone actually said those to you. And I'm like,
that's where you're
so about
wrong.
that, like, you know, like the I'm too much, like I don't know when to stop, shit like that, where I'm just like, damn, that one still kind of hits. Even the last one, I think I have way more friends than I actually do. Even like to this day, I look at like my screensaver of like all these like friends that I have, and I'm just like, damn, what if they all hate me? Like, and it's incredible that like it's weird how much like your youth impacts who you are. And I know that sounds so much like a, you know, fake intellectual, like, or like a man that did acid for the first time. It's like, can you imagine the relationships we make when we're young impact our lives? And I don't know, it's just like, you know, we each have, you know, you can have issues with your moms or your parents or your siblings, whatever, and that is all very obviously valid and decent, but I think there's just something so unique about like girl friend groups, and if you don't pick the right one, like I don't think there's a single way to go through tweendom with friends and have you be completely unscathed. Like, yeah. I think there's always going to be times where you are out of pocket, they're out of pocket, because like, again, you're both not only experiencing adolescence for the first time, but like girlhood for the first time, and just like all the things that come with that. You're suddenly aware of your own body and like, you know, of being self-conscious. And once you're self-conscious of yourself, you're self-conscious if your friends are dorky. Like if you suddenly have this like very curated image of yourself that you want to portray, and here comes like, you know, your dorky, basically homeschooled friend who like, you know, doesn't pick up on social cues, who might be a little autistic. I need to get a diagnosis. But who doesn't quite get it, who isn't quite fitting in right. You're embarrassed for them, and you kind of want to distance yourself from them. And that's like one of those like, you know, understandable tragedies of not just adolescence, but like just something about girlhood in particular, where like we are our first slut shamers, we are our first like, you know, misogyny regulators. Like, yeah, your mom might have given you your first eating disorder, but your friends were the one that's like, don't wear that, you look dumb and stupid and that's not in fashion anymore. Like, And I feel like my friends knew more about me than my mom ever did. My mom doesn't know about how many crushes I had. My mom never knew about anything. And like this friend group, because I say all this for 7th grade, and here's how I know, because I walked into 8th grade being like, this year's going to be different. Because for 2 weeks or so, I didn't have any friends. Mm-hmm. I need to make more friends. And that was my 8th grade resolution, is like, I'm going to make one friend in each class. That way, if anything blows up in my face, nothing will happen. And then I ran into reading class because I got a perfect score on my reading test the year before. And then the next year I got a 99. They're like, your reading score dropped. You got to take a reading class. And my parents were like, that's fucked up. And I'm like, I can't hear you. I'm reading for a class. So I was paired up with all these people who like did really bad on reading classes. And I'm like, oh, whatever. I'll just read in this class and it'll be fine. And said some girl was like, hi, my name is your sexual awakening. You want to be my first girlfriend? So Skyler really just didn't have a good, but like the first time I realized that I had feelings for another girl, these two were the first ones I told.
Yeah.
And they were the first ones I said, they were like, you should keep that to yourself. That's weird.
Wow. Do you know what's so interesting? Sorry, the reason I like gasped when you were like, I need to start making more friends is because I distinctly remember, and this has like stuck with me because I had a situation where like it was really important, where I remember being, honestly, it was probably in middle school, and I remember my mom telling me, because I think I was in this really tight knit like friend group, and I think I was probably just like telling her about it and complaining about it, whatever. And she told me, and she was like, it is really valuable and it is really important to have multiple friend groups and to have like multiple crowds that you can, you know, kind of like go to and from. And if those blend over a little bit, like that's amazing. But like you should not put all of your like feelings and emotions into like just a few people, because if one day they decide that you're annoying and they want to drop you, you have no one.
Yeah.
And I had a situation in high school where it was my fault and I was that annoying boy crazy girl, and like boys had never shown me attention. It was literally my fucking like senior year of high school. I never had my first kiss. Like I was so fucking desperate for male attention that two of my really good friends, actually it was already kind of a messy situation because they both had a crush on the same guy. And then we like had this whole situation. I had a crush on a completely different guy, and we had this whole thing where like we invited them all because we were friends with this other guy, and they were all on the baseball team. So they were like all friends, and then we were all friends. We're like, okay, we just need to like blend this group, and then like we can all have our happy ever after. I ended up like basically hooking up with this guy, or hooking up in like the high school that we like made out. And
Made out.
Yeah, but I was really fucking drunk. I literally didn't even remember it happening. So then the next morning I was like, oh, hey guys. And they were pissed. They were so fucking mad at me. And it was like this whole thing. And they were like, it was fine. And like things were going back to normal. But then that guy started like Snapchatting me. And because I was so desperate for male validation, I was Snapchatting him back, and like we were like talking, and then like they found out about it, and they were like, girl, what the fuck, like we gave you an opportunity to redeem yourself and you like continually fucked us over, which so fair, literally so fair. They made the right decision. I was completely in the wrong. But so then they like you know dropped me, and luckily I had another friend group, which honestly, thank fucking God that they like still wanted to be friends with me, because frankly I kind of like pushed them aside to be friends with these other people. I was like not a good person in high school, like just in general.
It's just something about the Anastasia brow gel that does something to a person's psyche, because I was also a weirdo the second that they introduced that brow gel into my makeup routine. I was like, and no, I'm gonna be mean. I was just so fucking insecure. That's literally what it was. I was so insecure, and I had so much going on at home that I was like terrified of people at school finding out about, that I felt like I had to mask that with like being cooler, like having a boyfriend, and like, you know, like doing all these things. Like I was just so desperate to like feel normal, that I think unfortunately that caused me to make very poor decisions at the expense of like other people's feelings. But I don't remember why I brought that up, but because multiple friend groups. But I was very thankful to have multiple friend groups in that instance, where like I
stopped being friends with those people one day. And it was really fucking awkward because I was in a lab group with them. I was in like a semester long lab group, and we literally had to like go to the like I think it was, what was it? It was anatomy. We literally had to go to the anatomy teacher and be like, we have to switch groups. Yeah. And it was like, and he was like, what, is everything okay? And we're like, no, we just think like we would work better like in different groups. And I had to like go to another group and be like, hey, like, can I join you guys? And it was just like, yeah, it was this whole thing. It was very weird. But yeah, girlhood is hard. And it's interesting because we were talking about this earlier when we were in the car, where I've definitely noticed, like, even now, some of those like feelings and thoughts, and I think things that like we are conditioned to pay attention to as girls and women in general, I like catch myself in those thought patterns where, like, for example, I'll meet someone, I'll literally not even like have a conversation with someone, I'll be like, oh hey, you know, like whatever, like be introduced to someone, and I'm immediately like, I don't like that person. And then I'm like, wait, what? Like, you don't even know, like, you don't know fucking anything about them, like,
goddamn
yeah
thing.
I'm like, why did you come up with that opinion so quickly? And usually when I break it down, I'm like, oh, it's because you're threatened by them, it's because you think that they're prettier than you, it's because you think that they're smarter than you think that they're more interesting than you think, you know, like, it is usually a reflection of something that I'm insecure about and not a reflection of them at all. And then once I really break that down, I'm like, damn, like this is why, these are the reasons why you maybe didn't make the best choices in school, or maybe why your friends at the time didn't make the best choices or didn't treat you in the best way. And it's so true, like you were saying earlier. I think a big part of girl friendships is that like it is so emotionally intimate, and these people know your secrets that you're not telling your mom. They, you know, like they know everything about your life, and it's unfortunate that like when certain things happen, when certain jealousies occur, or, you know, events happen where someone wronged another person, those are the things that they use against you and can hurt you in like the most vicious way. And it's like, men just fucking fight it out and they're good, but women,
they don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not, or if they do, it's not necessary to becoming friends.
Yeah.
Like, guys don't need sleepover deep talk sessions to be best friends. Sometimes it's just like they occupy each other's space and they vibe, and that's enough to be best friends for 15
they
years.
like each other's jokes, you know.
Some guy friends are like, he's my best friend, I had no idea he was getting divorced. Like, I had no idea he had marital problems at home. Like, that's not necessary for a deep, you know, close friendship. But there's just something about the women's need to share, to like be vulnerable. And I think leading all the way back to like the very, very start of this, and I think it's like, you know, why I feel so much protectiveness of, you know, my younger self, I mean, and why it's like, oh, what would she do? I you know, living for her, is I think, you know, the source of a lot of why we acted the way that we acted was insecurity. Like, I got kicked out of a sleepover once because I read my friend's diary. Like, she went to the bathroom and her diary was out, and I was like, I just couldn't fucking resist. I saw my name. She got out of the shower. I panicked, hid her diary. She came back out. She goes, "Where's my diary?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's in this room." She's like, "You can go." And my dad had to come and pick me up. And like, that's just like most of the issues that came from like deep insecurities of why I acted the way that I acted. And I think, you know, yeah, to this day, like I said, there are some things that still hit in those issues list from like when I was 12 that still hit when I'm 24. And I think once it's really easy, even like at the beginning during this episode, for like at the same time you have to give like your friends grace, and you can't always permanently be in a state of victimhood, because I'm sure, like, again, I was hard to get along with, but at the same time, it's that self-hatred that got me in this mess in the first place. And I feel like why a lot of people feel so indebted to this like little girl is, I think the first thing you learn turning from girlhood to womanhood is self-hatred, where before there wasn't any. You learn self-hatred. It's not something that's like shows up in your bones. It's one of the first, you know, like signs of changing from girl to teenager is that you start to hate yourself. And I feel like one of the most important things that I've discovered about like unraveling and kind of healing my, you know, insecurity is even like, even with all of her issues, even though like I know she was too much and she never knew, you know, how to react, and she always did the wrong thing, like I didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've already brought it up again, but like why I love to watch, you know, Heartstopper and other, like, I still love to read teen books is like living in a world where, like, you know, it's freeing and relieving to be like, you know what, for all of the issues that you had with your own insecurities, to just understand that like you deserved better than that. you deserved a better coming out story. You deserved a better friend group. You deserved all these adventures. That is something in, taking peace with that, I feel like, is why I brought the issues left with me to my apartment in Los Angeles instead of letting it fester in a box in the middle of Kansas. Is to really look and, like, before I would laugh at this from, like, you pop people's knuckles and, like, if your ex-boyfriend wants you to be a part of his, like, stupid inside joke where, like, you're his dog and you're his daughter, then he'll let you. But just, like, kind of reading between the lines, and instead of, like, laughing at, like, oh my gosh, like, little Skyler must have been a fucking dork and a loser, to just be like, aw, poor bastard. You didn't deserve any of that. And I feel like that's the first step of being nicer, and why I feel like we hold our younger selves in such high esteem is that we feel like we owe it to them because we're the ones that got rid of them in the first place, and we owe it to them to
Sorry, mic drop. Mic drop moment. God damn.
This is
so much wisdom on the pod.
Okay, cut the cameras before I will start crying. I want to end it out by saying that it's never too late, and that I feel like, not only, if any of this has been relatable to you at all, it's not only give yourself grace, but give them grace also. Like, it's been made very clear to me through the research of this episode that girlhood is never easy for anybody, and as much as it can feel like very Sunday special to be like, forgive thine enemies, they did not know what they were doing, because some bitches genuinely were like you were saying, your neighbor, like, just bitches, just evil and cruel, and knew that they were doing bad and knew that they could get away with it. I'm not saying that all girls are automatically angels and should be automatically forgiven, but I think the nuance will help in general kind of soothe that ache that you have, instead of just being like, well, that was forever ago, I'm over it, is to actually be like, it's okay if you're not over it. It's okay if you're still hung up on things that happened a decade ago. That's fine. Oh my God, a decade. I'm going to kill myself. I'm old as fuck. It's the Taylor Swift principle. Never get over anything. Never let things go. And I feel like is having... If you were burned by a girlfriend group in the past, to not let that stop you from trying to join one again. I feel like this is how we end, like, literally all of our episodes by now. But I feel like one of the greatest joys in my life right now is my friend group full of these, like, amazing women that genuinely I am so in love with, platonically, romantically. I would live for them. I would die for them. And I'm genuinely so happy that I have them. And it's something that even, like, when I moved out here, I was afraid to join, because I'm just like, no, being friends with guys is safer. It's not. It is not. It is not that. And I feel like, if this has been something where, I don't know, like, I was friends with girls before, and like the classic, pick me slogan where it's like, girls are just so much drama. Try again. Mm-hmm. Try to be friends with women your age again, and I guarantee you that it will be different. And it can go, now that you're all a little bit more sure of yourself, and you have a little bit more of, like, a steady hand of the world at large, and, like, your own internalized, sense of individuality, that girlfriend groups are, again, a beautiful, incredible thing that everyone should have, and that it doesn't always have to be the messy middle school garbage that a lot of them inevitably turn into.
Yeah, I think it can be very healing, too, to have, like, present, healthy, emotional friendships that you deserve and you deserved when you were younger, but now you can have them now.
And you can make a podcast with them.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone
we did it, Kaylynne. We did it. We made it.
We won. We won girl friendship.
Be like us.
I thought you were just going to say be gay.
Be gay, do crimes. Okay, Skyler, listen to me. You're 11 years old. You are bi. You like men and women. It's fine. It is fine.
Well, thank you so much for listening. This was a good one. Thanks. Yeah, that was a good one.
Nothing like saying something and then seeing someone else's mouth pop open.
Yeah, hearing my jaw pop, my fucking TMJ. Yes, thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed. We are available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Later.